to celebrate International Women's Day today with this event focused on AID's enduring commitment to improving women's lives and the data that are available in the DHS around closing the gender gap. And so thank you so much for coming out and being here with us and to celebrate this publication. And I hope you will take the time really to look at this. You'll hear a lot about it today. It's a beautiful publication. It's full of terrific data and lovely photographs, and it represents a lot of work. Data from over 100 surveys and 46 countries are included in this report. And I want to thank the people who put this event together, but I think I want to start by thanking the women and men in developing countries who provided the information and the glimpse into their lives that are reflected here, including around some issues that aren't easy to tell people about. And we're really fortunate to have these kind of data and to have a 30-year relationship with the Demographic and Health Surveys project under which these data were collected. AID has been a promoter of and a funder of the Demographic and Health Surveys project from the beginning, and we're very proud of that. We're going into our 7th 5-year iteration of the Demographic and Health Surveys, but even more proud, it makes us even more proud, the fact that these data are felt to be owned by the countries and the people who provided them. And these are global data, and they belong to the countries and they belong to the world. The data are open and available. The data sets are there on the DHS website for anybody to use and to analyze, and they provide excellent source of information over time and across countries about the progress that has been made. And I think we wouldn't have the kind of successful programs that we have or the support that we have from Congress for this work without having some of the data that are in this report and others that the DHS produces. So I really commend the report to you and other information on the DHS website about the project at large. So I do want to thank the people who were most involved in putting this event together. Madeline Short from the Office of Population and Reproductive Health devoted a lot of time and thought to this event and made her way through the hoops that it takes in a bureaucracy to get something like this organized. Also, a number of people, of course, at ICF, Lori Liskin, Sally Zweimuller, Sarah Head, who's one of the authors of the publication, the Women's Museum for the beautiful space, not this room, of course, but also the museum in general, and ICF, who are going to host the reception afterwards that we hope you will all attend and mingle with us. So I want to first invite Mr. Ken Cummings to come up. Ken Cummings is a veteran. He's also the Foreign Affairs Advisor to Representative Chris Van Hollen from Maryland. Prior to his current position, he served as Director of International Affairs for the Maryland Secretary of State and as a researcher and translator at the Woodrow Wilson Center and Kennan Institute for Advanced Russian Studies. We are really appreciative of your coming today. Thank you so much on behalf of your boss, who's a long-standing supporter of USAID, a former professional staff member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Congressman Van Hollen has a strong background in national security policy. He's the son of a Foreign Service officer, lived and studied abroad for many years, and has remained active in issues related to U.S. foreign policy, national security, and development. And it just so happens that I went to the same college that he did and graduated in the same year. So it's even more special for me to be here today. Thank you so much.
Mr. Van Hollen wanted to be here today, but he couldn't be asked me to come and read a letter on his behalf. So he says, "Greetings. As the son of an American Foreign Service officer, I've witnessed firsthand the good works performed by AID. That work is most successful when it's supported by high-quality data. In the field of global health, no other data source is as highly respected, widely used, and of consistently high quality than the Demographic and Health Surveys program. This year marks USAID's 30th anniversary of leading the DHS program, 30 years of high-quality data that guide worldwide efforts to improve population health and well-being. I salute USAID for its visionary leadership of the DHS program and its long-term commitment to the data-driven development, and I salute those organizations and individuals who carry out the work of the program, delivering results day in, day out. Today is an opportunity to celebrate the important work that has been accomplished through the DHS program, to reflect on the continuing gender inequalities that DHS data reveal, and to recommit ourselves to improve the lives of women and girls around the world for a brighter tomorrow. I commend you for your work and offer my support in the work that lies ahead. Thank you.
It's also my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Sunita Kishore. Dr. Kishore is the director of the Demographic and Health Surveys program and a renowned gender specialist. She's worked for the DHS program since 1993 and has supported the development of special modules on gender-based violence and women's status. In 2006, Dr. Kishore published a widely cited article of survey results in several countries that clearly demonstrate the association of higher risks for pregnancy loss and sexually transmitted infections among women who have experienced gender-based violence. Her research also documents the intergenerational impact of family violence. Sunita.
Thank you so much. It is an incredible honor to be here today and to be addressing you. Not only is it going to be International Women's Day, but I stand here because DHS has been providing data on gender issues long before anybody else was doing so. And these data have come to mean so much to the world because they are the only ones that open the door of households and tell us what's going on inside. Those who know me know that you can't predict a lot about my presentation. All right, what you see before you is a map, but not any map. It is a map of the world with a lot of countries that are marked. And it's very clear these countries are the ones in which we work or have worked over the years. It's been 30 years since USAID has been supporting this project, and we are now covering a very large part of the developing world. Yeah? Okay. Well, this is not very interesting, but what I want you to focus on is those 30 years have seen the DHS evolve in terms of a name. And each time around, we've sort of been linked to the phase of the project. And it's every 5 years. So it's 1, 2, 3, then it became measure, and then it became measure phase, measure DHS plus, and then measure phase 3, etc. Very, very uninteresting. So, this time around, we've decided we're going to have a name that is not dependent on the phase of the project. Henceforth, I ask all of you to start talking about the DHS the way you've always talked about it. The DHS program. It allows us to distinguish between our flagship surveys, which are also called the DHS. We've got several other kinds of surveys, the Malaria Indicator Survey, the AIDS Indicator Survey, the SPARS, but the flagship survey has always been the DHS. And now, when you're referring to the program, please call us the DHS program or the Demographic and Health Surveys program. We've got, in accordance with this new we like to call it new, although we've always been called this more or less informally, all of our websites and so we've got what used to be called www.measuredhs.com is now, we have transitioned to DHS program, the previous dhsprogram.com, the previous website you will be able to get here from Measure DHS for a while, but please encourage everybody to start using the new name. Stat compiler remains the same, but the user forum will now be userforum.dhsprogram.com. All right. On to the real event, namely the publication that we're all here to talk about, to allow us to look at data in one place. And if those of you who are much more savvy about Twitter and Facebook, please follow us on Twitter. And I have to actually ask Sally about all of that down there, but those who are going to be following us on Twitter will know what to do with it. And before I launch into the report, I'd like you to watch this very short video which puts across the key messages of this report.
What happens when women thrive? Communities flourish. Countries prosper. Our world is a better place. Women's lives are improving, but data show that progress is too slow. More girls are completing primary school now than ever before. But in 42 countries, fewer than half of women have completed secondary school. Around the globe, more women are making choices for themselves, like family planning, yet fewer than one-half of married women use modern contraceptives. And in some countries, more than one-third of married women have experienced violence by an intimate partner. But we can make a difference. We can act on evidence that fuels decision-making to better women's lives. USAID has the statistics we need. Their Demographic and Health Surveys program, DHS, captures data that can inspire the most effective programming for change. So don't wait. Share this video. Get the report. Let's all join with USAID in leading the way to help women and families thrive.
Okay. Communication theory says that to get your message across, you've got to use 7 different means. Today, we're just going to use these 2. You've seen them now. Now I'm just going to repeat everything that's in the video so that when you leave this room, you've got a very clear idea of whether there has or has not been progress when it comes to women's lives. So we have put this publication together, and the objective of this publication really is to assess progress towards gender equality and women's empowerment since 2000, when the Millennium Development Goals were adopted. The publication, as you all know, is based on DHS data, and the advantage of it being based on DHS data is that the data are all nationally representative. The surveys are done with the same methodology, allowing the data to be comparable, and they're all based on women and men aged 15 to 49. In addition, several of the countries since 2000 have had more than one survey, so that allows us to look at trends. We've got trends for 33 countries for several of the indicators. Wherever possible, we've included the same data for men so that we can actually look at gender disparities. And we have tried to highlight some of the countries that are considered areas of conflict and insecurity by the U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. The countries included in this report, that's what this map is about. And as you can see, in all 4 continents, we've got countries from all 4 continents in this particular report, and so even up there in Europe, we have some of the countries included. All right, the report framework is in line with USAID Gender Equality and Female Empowerment Policy. And what does this report emphasize? It emphasizes it looks at three different facets of what advancement would mean for women. The idea behind the report was to try and see what data we have for one, the reduction of gender disparities in access to control over and benefit from resources, wealth, etc. Two, increased capability of women and girls to realize their rights, determine their life outcomes, and influence decision-making in households, communities, and societies. And lastly, the reduction of gender-based violence. These are the three themes that stand out in the policy, and we've tried to provide the data to begin to look at each one of them. All right, so what do we have for resources for empowerment and equality? Now, clearly, I'm not going to be able to cover all of the data or all of the indicators you're going to find in the report. This is just a sprinkling, a selection. All right? You've got the report explores gender disparities in resources, services, and opportunities. So there's several indicators along those lines. And it examines women's access to the basic building blocks of empowerment, including education, employment, healthcare, and also tries to provide some information on the barriers that women may be facing to achieve equality. What are the key findings? Not surprising, resources for empowerment are distributed unequally between women and men. But women have made some gains. They made some gains in education, employment, healthcare, and family life. In particular, what do we find about education? We know from the video, and I repeat, access to primary education is expanding worldwide. Unlike those who have been looking at the MDGs and have decided that enough progress has been made in the field of education, or in the field of primary education, or equality in primary education, our data do not support that women have achieved equality. Nonetheless, there has been notable progress. Cambodia and Nepal are among the countries that we looked at that have made the greatest progress since 2000. But more men than women can still, when it comes to literacy, more men than women are literate and have completed primary school in nearly every country we looked at. That does not speak or does not equal equality. In 18 countries, less than 55% of women aged 15 to 24 have completed primary school. Just to give you that extra punch. 55% completing primary school. There's a long way to go. What about employment? Over half of women are employed in 33 of the 45 countries. That sounds like good news. Employment is a pathway to empowerment. However, compared to men, women are much less likely to be employed, which, okay. But among the employed women and employed men, women are much less likely to be earning cash for the work they do. In other words, they are much more likely to be unpaid workers. That does not equal gender equality. What about healthcare? There's been progress. In the majority of countries, even with the progress, only about half of the births are taking place in health facilities. And trends show that the proportion is rising in most countries, so there is some good news. And in Cambodia, Egypt, Nepal, and Rwanda, these are the countries that, among the countries we looked at, have experienced the greatest improvements in maternal health indicators. What are some of the barriers to accessing resources? Child marriage, perhaps, in many ways, for empowerment. These are resources for empowerment. Child marriage, in many ways, is perhaps one of the biggest barriers. And what do we see? In this comparative analysis, we find that over 40% of women marry before age 18 in 16 of the 47 countries we looked at. And in Bangladesh, Guinea, and Mali, greater than 60% married before age 18. So child marriage continues to be a serious issue in a large number of the parts of the world that we work in. All right, we move on to the second theme in the policy, which is women's control of their own lives. For this theme, the report examines whether women's ability to realize their rights and determine their life outcomes has increased. We try and mine the data for indicators which would help us look at that question. And it investigates how much influence women have in key areas of their daily lives. Making household decisions, deciding about the use of earnings, planning for their families, and negotiating sex. Again, and we look at, in this presentation, I'm looking at only a very limited set of indicators. The key findings basically are overall for this particular theme or this dimension of empowerment. Women's control over their own lives shows some encouraging trends, but substantial gender gaps remain. Let's look at a bit of data. When it comes to control over cash earnings, this is the first bullet here is for those among women who are employed, among married women who are employed. About 90% say that in 29 or 44 countries say that they have a say in how their own cash earnings are used. So they are either alone or jointly having a say on how their own earnings are to be used. However, we did see that less than 50% or about 50% of women in some countries are employed. And we also saw, or you didn't see, but I told you, that in fact a large proportion of women who are employed do not earn cash. Therefore, the question of whether you control your cash earnings is only going to partially help women along the way. What is also important for married women is whether they have a say in how their husband's earnings are used. And in fact, far fewer women have a say in how their husband's earnings are used. So for those of you who are data geeks, the first bullet here really is among women who are employed, whereas the second bullet refers to all women who are married and have a husband who is employed or who has cash earnings. Now, the final, did I go the wrong way? I did. Okay. The other aspect of control is obviously family planning. Less than half of currently married women use modern contraception in 37 of 46 countries. So in the majority of countries we look at, less than half of the married women are using modern contraception. What's perhaps a little bit more discouraging than that, because that data we know, is that in fact family planning use has plateaued or increased very modestly in most countries. So we really are left with countries where we have to do a lot more work than for the countries that have already sort of got into a more self-sustaining mode for family planning, they are, above the 50% mark. But the ones that remain below the 50% mark, there's a lot of work to be done. All right. The final theme was in the policy is about violence in women's lives. So the report looks at, as many of you know, the DHS data on violence is not. We don't implement the domestic violence module in every single country. It is an optional module. We like to implement it in countries where there is a commitment to do something about it. And The report looks at the countries for which we have the data and assesses changes in gender-based violence and its effect on women, examines women's experience of intimate partner violence, and also looks at female genital coverage. Why is it that I can't get this right? Okay. What are the key findings? Those of you who work in the area, nothing new. Violence in women's lives remains disturbingly common, and progress in reducing it at a national level has been extremely limited. I think that is perhaps being kind. I really don't think there's been much progress at all. More than 1/3 of married women have experienced physical and or sexual violence by their husband in 14 of 28 countries. So 1/3 in half of the 28 countries for which we looked at data. And this is for ever married women. And if you look at the trends, and these are all the countries for which we have the trends, while levels of violence have fallen slightly in some countries, they have risen in others. Now this could also be reporting, better reporting, etc. Nonetheless, over time, we hope to be able to see what the trends are going to be telling us, which allows us to move away from different kinds of different levels of reporting. What we also know is that few women who experience violence seek help. And Colombia has the highest rate of help seeking, while Cambodia has made the greatest progress in this area. All right, what about female genital cutting? FGC remains a problem for many women in Africa. In 6 of 14 countries, more than 60% of women have experienced FGC. And this is a nice big map in which you can actually see things. And it shows you all of the countries for which we have the data and where we can look at progress. Data on trends in 8 countries on FGC shows only modest declines. So, in summary, in the words of President Joyce Banda of Malawi, this report highlights the improving status of women throughout the last decade, but also underscores how many women still cannot go to school, do not have access to health care, and who still suffer from gender discrimination and violence. All of this not only holds back these women, it holds back the families they're part of, and it holds back, in her words, our entire nation. And in my words, our entire world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunita, for that peek into some of the information that's in this report, and I hope that's really sparked everybody's interest in perusing it further. So this is my last formal responsibility here, and the rest of this event is really going to be a nice conversation with some ambassadors that we're lucky to have with us today, guided by Carla Koppel. And Carla Koppel, we're also very lucky to have Carla here. Carla is USAID's Chief Strategy Officer. She has more than 25 years of experience in international affairs. And it's particularly appropriate that she's here because prior to serving as the Chief Strategy Officer, she was USAID's first Senior Coordinator for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment and Senior Advisor to the USAID Administrator Raj Shah. Under her leadership, the agency developed its gender equality and female empowerment policy, as well as specific agency-wide strategies and plans for advancing the U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security, and the U.S. strategy for preventing and combating gender-based violence globally. She served as USAID's representative to the White House Council on Women and Girls, and contributed to the government-wide efforts to ensure gender equality and women's empowerment are core goals of U.S. foreign policy. So, Carla, I turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, and good afternoon to everybody. I guess we scheduled this to get as close as we possibly could to International Women's Day, which is tomorrow. But it's also nice to be able to end a Friday afternoon with a nice reception. So I want to Thank you all for organizing it with a reception at the end on a Friday afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here and part of this conversation, because I remember when we first were talking about the shape for this report and how it should look and what the data should look like and how it should be analyzed. And so it's wonderful to see something from its inception to its coming to fruition. And I want to congratulate Sunita, Madeline, all of the team inside and outside of AID for having done a lot of work in producing what I think is not only a really informative and interesting report, but also an exceptionally beautiful one in terms of really presenting information in a way that is understandable and visually appealing. So kudos for that. For me, the conversations about how and why data is so important are really driven home by your presentation. When I came into the position of Senior Coordinator for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, I was struck by the urgency of the call that was being made by Secretary Clinton at the time and many others for attention to this issue. And I was equally struck by the dearth of data to demonstrate the magnitude of need and how to best navigate a path forward in terms of meeting that need, reducing gender inequity, and empowering women and girls around the world. And so it's enormously important to have this data, and to have data that not only looks at a point in time, but some trend lines, and not only looks at trend lines, but looks at the situation from one region to another, and tries to help advance a conversation that is incredibly important. And the more that that conversation is informed by data and evidence, the more robust it can be. When we were talking about this event, I asked for some examples of where data has really driven decisions, because I think that those data points can be so incredibly important. And I was given three, and I think they're really three from the health sector, and I think that it really, the story repeats itself in any sector you're working in, but I wanted to relay those three to all of you because I think they're instructive. The first I was told about was related to domestic violence in Uganda, where DHS data from 2006, and I'll just refer to it as DHS per your guidance. I don't know whether it was Measure, whether it was DHS 1 or 2 or 3, or so I'll just say DHS. Indicated that there was an extremely high prevalence and severity rate, that some third of ever married women had experienced sexual violence in the 12 months preceding the survey. So not in their lifetime, but just in the year before. And that led ultimately to the 2010 Domestic Violence Act, which defined and criminalized domestic violence. So the power of that data was really very important. When we turn to Ethiopia, the results for maternal health improvements that came out of the DHS survey there actually led to a massive strategic shift in maternal health programming, and with very promising results that have then led to that being the foundation for our longer-term strategy moving forward in terms of combating child and maternal health. And on the converse side, in India, some data that was basically surveillance data from antenatal care clinics indicated an enormous problem with HIV infection rates in India, and indicated that it was the largest number of people living with HIV in the entire world were located in India. And yet the 2005 and 2006 DHS data actually showed there was no epidemic, and further pointed out that the prevalence was really 1/5 the level originally estimated, and was focused in groups that were prostitutes and truck drivers, which enabled India and others to really focus and invest in the areas that were most important, with the groups that were most affected by the disease. And so it allowed us to be, the global community, to be much more strategic in the way it moved forward with those investments. Now, those are just 3 examples, but I think they're really potent examples of the power of data. The power of data to raise our awareness of challenges and problems that exist, and the power of data to enable us to do a better job in targeting and combating the problems as they are unfolding in countries around the world. And so with that, what I'd like to do is invite our panel up to the stage for a conversation about what the implications are of data for the work that we're doing around the world, for our countries and for developing nations around the world. And I'm really honored, as you all walk up, perhaps I'll introduce you. I'm really honored to have them joining us this afternoon. I think it's a very special conversation with people I respect and like quite a bit. 3 very esteemed ambassadors. Ambassador Aas of Norway, and forgive me if I'm butchering your name. I've been in meetings with Norwegians where I said, oh, I know this person, and they said to me, who? And I repeated again, and they said, who? And by the 3rd time, some Norwegian took pity on me and re-said the name so that the person could understand what I was talking about. Anyway, Ambassador Aas became the ambassador of Norway to the United States in September of 2013. But during his distinguished career with the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he has been political director in the ministry itself, Norwegian ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, and the Norwegian governor to the International Atomic Energy Agency's Board of Governors. Ambassador Ali of the African Union became ambassador of the AU to the United States in April 2007. So perhaps you are the dean of the ambassador corps here today. She is a veteran Tanzanian civil servant, politician, and NGO founder, a long-serving member of parliament, held several ministerial positions, most recently as the Minister of State in the Office of the Chief Minister in Zanzibar. And she's committed to improving the lives of women and girls, having founded an NGO dedicated to that cause, the Zanzibar Women Welfare Trust. And last but not least, my dear friend, Ambassador Rifa Koukku-Ronde, who became ambassador of Finland to the U.S. in September of 2011, after working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for some 30 years. And during her distinguished career, she's held the position of Undersecretary of State for Global Development Issues, Director General at the Department for Development Policy, and Deputy Director General at the Department for Europe, among others, and has held numerous governing positions with the Finnish governor to the regional development banks and the board of the Institute for African Leadership for Sustainable Development. Please join me for this conversation. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will start our conversation maybe with a couple of questions for each of you, and then we'll open up the floor for conversation, because I think this is a really wonderful opportunity for us to have a bit of a discussion. Initially, maybe just from your perspective, where do you think data has been important in the work your countries have done? And perhaps you could talk a little bit about interventions you think have been proved to be a success in addressing some of the needs that have come through the data. And perhaps we'll start at the end and work our way across, or should I start with the dean? Okay.
Thank you, Carla. And but before trying to respond to your question, I must say that I'm really honored to be here today, and it's a bit scary too, to be honest. But I'm also very pleased that you pronounced my name in a correct manner. It could be pronounced in different manners, and sometimes when I go on a flight and aircraft, and particularly when I go with British Airways, they always ask me, "Sir, how do you pronounce your surname?" So, but it's Ås, and my first name it's Kåre. And then I would also like to say that I think it's a very good timing of this meeting, this event, and also very much would like to congratulate all women here with the International Women's Day tomorrow. Then to your question, Carla, and I would say that for a country like Norway, with a huge development assistance to many places on Earth, I would say that in every sort of decision-making process, it's very important to have exact data. Because if we don't have that, it's very difficult to allocate resources to those sectors which are most needed. Then we also have in Norway sort of identify key areas which we have concentrated our efforts on for many years. We have done that towards specific countries, but also towards specific sectors. And two of those sectors were identified as part of the Millennium Development Goals, and particularly MDG 4 and MDG 5. And I think also seeing now, and in the sort of having comments with the post-2015 agenda, talking about what should be the Sustainable Development Goals for the period 2015 and onwards. It's very important for a country like Norway to have the data to really to see where we should put our efforts. And we are very glad also for seeing that on MDG 4 and 5 that there have been significant progress, and I think also the publication here today is very useful in that regard. Then I would say that, and you said you referred some from my what I have been doing in my time in the ministry, and I have been mainly working on security and defense issues. But I also, I must say, had the pleasure to be posted to Afghanistan for 2.5 years. And I must, and that's I must think that I really think that was probably not the most interesting, but the most challenging part of my career, but also where I can make a difference. And there was a reference here to where you can make a difference. And going there and as an ambassador, having a lot of money to allocate and to spend, and to have the data needed for allocating those resources, that was very valuable. And we concentrated on building schools, and we did that in a particular part of the country, but also to other sectors. But knowing, for example, that in my time in those 2.5 years, I think we built 100 schools in the northwestern part of the country, and seeing actually also that that boys and girls had the opportunity to attend school was important, and we made a difference. So just one final word, and that is, I think that in a country like Afghanistan, it's very important to sustain what has been achieved, and that's, I think, that's both a task for the Afghan government, but indeed also a task for the international community. Great, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, especially during the eve of this very special day tomorrow. We Finns always celebrate more the eves of the days, Christmas Eve, and so it's more important for us to be here today. And so our timing is good. Timing is perfect. And what a very interesting and excellent report you have been producing. Highly interesting, and also very comfortable to read, by the way. I really very much like the statistics, how you have been doing the whole layout also. It's not easy always to put it in a very understandable format, so thank you very much.
About data, I think data is the basis of anything. I cannot imagine that the country can do anything without data, actually. If you think about national budget, for instance, planning, it must be based on the number of people living in the country, first of all, and the sort of basic information. Of course, gender there is very much basic information how it is. If you if I think my country, for instance, where the sort of biggest challenges is of course education, health cost, social cost in general. So you need to have a pretty good picture of what is happening in a country all format. So that is really the base on any kind of planning, strategic planning. I'm very happy to share that the Finnish Bureau of Statistics is really cooperating with all the bureaus of statistics globally, and there is a good networking on improving the statistics globally. But unfortunately, there is a lot to be done still, because we have very many times we are lacking statistics, appropriate statistics, even basic statistics, and then there are some challenges in statistics also nowadays. For instance, that this unpaid work, for instance, is not really valued. For instance, it has definitely a value in societies. Or then, for instance, some of the surveys are done by household basis and not individual basis. So those sort of things one needs to correct also in the future, that we need to have sort of comparable statistics as well. But statistics are very powerful, and that has a powerful. It is a powerful tool in international work also. And if I think about the good statistics, also what the World Bank is doing, the United Nations is doing, it's really very necessary that this work is going on, and that we are supporting also that work. I agree with everything Kåre said about international development cooperation and some of the achievements which we have been gaining there. Finland is very proud on being able to support UN Women so strongly. I think we are now the biggest contributor, and that is a good news. But on the other hand, it is sad news, because if a small country like Finland is supporting, it is the biggest donor for UN Women. It means that there is some bigger countries who should do more. So I am challenging there. I got that. Some richer countries also. Domestically, I think if I think about successes, really some basics. I was wondering, when I used to be undersecretary, and I've been sort of 1/3 at least in my career, I have been working at development issues. I was thinking, if I were a dictator, where I would like to put all the money. I came every time I came to the same, actually, education, girls' education particularly. And looking at the statistics, I think there is incredible challenge, because through the girls' education, you can tackle also some of the health issues, especially some of the issues of the participation, for instance, in the societies, which is another challenge still. And I mean, through participation also in various forms. And then I mean, all studies show that if the girls and women are educated, also the sexual and reproductive health is this kind of issues are taken into account much more, and the rights, by the way. So and then you can have that internationally. I'm very proud of a few things besides this UN Women and our contribution internationally in various fields, but especially that we have been strongly supporting women's participation in some of the international processes. One to mention particularly is the climate change negotiations. We suddenly find out that there were no women discussing in the rooms where they should be. Actually, there are very often, we are lacking 50% of the world's population in the issues where actually women are carrying the most burden. The other issue which we have been really very much looking is political and economic empowerment. And that is the challenge in the future as well. We were very honored and proud to be asked in the Equal Futures Partnership Initiative by Secretary Clinton. And there are other forms, of course, to carry on, but it's a very, very powerful initiative which can make change as well. Health and supporting sexual and reproductive health and right is something which we have our President Hollen, previous President of the Republic of Finland, is very active, and that is some area where we have been putting most of our funds, for instance, in UN, so strong support on that kind of issues. I could mention some other issues, but probably we are getting to these sort of issues again. But I would really emphasize that there is a lot of things to be done, unfortunately, even in my country, for instance, when you look about women participation on boards, sort of private companies. So only 20% at the moment are women. And I think that all studies show also that the more women you have on boards, the more equality there is also, the more profitable the company. So even that can be proved in the statistics even. Statistics are powerful too.
Do you want to just, before we turn to Ambassador Ali, I wanted you to just make the point you made earlier about the domestic violence in Finland, because I thought that was quite interesting.
Yes, there is a new study in the European Union actually, which shows that domestic we are pretty high actually very high and some other Nordic countries as well are high in domestic or sort of sexual harassment, domestic violence, these sort of issues. And I was wondering, that is issue which we have been identifying already years back, and there are things which have been done. It continues to be challenged, but then at the same time I was thinking also that could it be also part, and it is good because it is so powerful, these statistics actually, that now it always wakes up in the sense that you are always challenging and the sort of whole society is challenged to look that something goes wrong, what could we do more, what we could do better. And then we compare, we go probably to the countries also to have references that are some other countries doing some issues better than we are, what can we learn also. The other issue is also that, of course, also the how to do these sort of surveys, are they comparable? In the sense, is our culture such that we have, for instance, more sort of, we are more able to also to report on these kind of issues, that it is the society is so open that we can report also, or you are more sensitive to some of the issues, for instance, that you recognize that you are actually, for instance, sexual harassed. Now in a situation where maybe in some other places you don't recognize that. But these are the issues which we are now going to study, of course, much more. And definitely it's good that these kind of statistics are coming also, and we are discussing about it, because then we can tackle this and we can try to improve our situation.
Thank you. That's right.
Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to USAID for arranging this meeting today, and also for their entire commitment to bring to the fore the data which are important for women empowerment and development in the world. And I represent African Union, and as you know, African Union is not a country. It's an organization, more political and economic organization, that has 54 member states. Of course, in Africa we have 55 countries, but 54 are member states. And in that respect, we are lucky that we celebrate the National Day for Women we have our own Africa. We have our own Africa Day, the Day of African Women. And for this year, we gave on the theme, and I would like to read the theme, says standalone goal on gender equality and women's empowerment in post-2015 agenda. So we are already looking ahead towards post-2015, and Africa will remain through African Union to be allowed to have our own way to provide input to the whole process of post-2015 agenda. So only in January, my president was the ultimate decision maker in African Union is the heads of state. So they decided also to impact on by having a committee of heads of state, the impact on post-2015 agenda. Now, with respect to the question that we're talking about, the importance of data and the importance of surveys, to be able to have data that would enable for member state and any organization to be able to have a correct response. And that from response, then you make a policy direction so that you can implement those policies. So in terms of African Union, as I said, we are not a country, we are an institution. And we normally reach a decision by also enabling member states to participate. So we have two ways normally where we come up into a response. The first one, we do data collection, and we ask member state, for a specific issue, we ask member state to provide data on what is happening in their countries. And from the data that we receive from member state, then we analyze the data and we ask our experts in that field and our partners, and then we discuss on those data analysis, and then we come out with the position. Now we also do survey again for specific focused issue also. So in that respect, statistics in Africa is still a problem. And only last year when World Bank decided to provide a program and funding for Africa, as a continent through African Union, to have a unified data, because we were behind some of the data. Most of the data that came from, if you look with our partners, for specific area, you find those data, they are up to date. But there are some data that we don't have up-to-date data. And the reason is, for instance, we still have a problem. For instance, we talk about census, and that's one example. Census is very important information for member states, but also for our continent, to plan ahead. We talk about economic development, talk about integration. We need to know how many are we. So you find some countries, they don't provide census. They have not done census even today. You see, they are still way, way behind. So I'm saying this because this is one example of lack of data that impact on overall planning in the continent. And also, traditionally, I'm not saying for all countries in Africa, but sometimes to targeted groups, they don't provide that data. Because suppose you go and ask, the reason why I give example of census, you go and ask question about how many are in your household. And you ask a woman, how many children you have? In some of the tradition, it's like, why do you want to know about my children? You know, we believe children is wealth for Africa. So why do you want to put a curse to me when I have an average family in Africa, the children are 6, 7, and then they won't give you the correct. I'll give you an example of how difficult to have the data. But now, our president also 3 years ago, they decided now, they took a resolution saying we have to promote data, we have to have a uniform data for Africa. And now, with World Bank support, we are going to have each year a published document that will provide enough information about what we have in Africa in terms of both population, in terms of other necessary data. Now, when I talk about response or intervention, we have done, as I said before, quite depending on the issue that we are focusing, we have come up with a very important intervention. And some of the interventions have really worked so well for Africa. And I would like to give you a few examples. Now, we have looked into issues, for instance, political issues, health issues, and of course, economic issues, and gender equality, and gender equity, and empowerment. Now, let's take example of health. And in the field of health, there were three component intervention, but that led to a charter, that led to a resolution, that led to sort of a campaign that enabled member states. If you ask a member state about question, for instance, about maternal mortality and about issue of childbirth, about how far our member states have been following childbirth and maternal mortality, we are seeing improvement, reduction in maternal mortality for many countries in Africa. Why? Because when we had received the data saying that women in Africa die, more women die in Africa because of childbirth. And so African Union came out with a campaign we call the Karma campaign. And this is a campaign that focused to reduce maternal mortality in Africa. And this campaign was launched 4 years ago. And now, up to now, we have 51 member states already signed and ratified the campaign for reduction of maternal mortality. And we have champions in most of these member states. We have champions of karma, like some of the champions are ordinary people, like the village traditional birth attendant. We promoted, they are not us, but the countries have promoted those women who have helped women, other women in birth, like birth attendant. So, in order for African Union to follow on the impact of the Karma program, the Karma campaign, we have followed because the member states themselves have been interested, and we have followed. To what extent these countries, the Karma countries, have managed to reduce maternal mortality. And we are very much happy to see many countries now, they've been able to reduce maternal mortality. For so many areas, for instance, in providing healthcare facility, for having the early, early capability for pregnant women to be able to go to the centers for monitoring, especially when you were supposed to go for 9 months, but because most of the women can't go to the city center to be able to have those maternal pregnancy tests and follow-up for the pregnancy up to 9 months. But now, because of several interventions, you find they provide nurse attendants in the village. They've increased the number of nurse attendants. The government, because they came to know what is the crisis and what the government to be able to do to address those issues. They also provide in a holistic manner. When you go to the center, MCH center, then they also look into all other issues. They also look into high blood pressure, malaria, and HIV education and other things. So all this came because of one program, Karma, the advocacy and then with that advocacy you analyze specific issues. You want to address what the problem of high blood pressure for women, what the problem of what's the case for malaria, and how do we link malaria eradication program with childbirth, and how many cases of women who die, pregnant women die because of malaria. So we feel that was one of the interventions that had really had a positive, but we're still following of what to do next. And we're thinking of having a program to train more community health workers. And this came because of the same thing. Now, another example of intervention, and this is maybe I should say in the political area. we have realized that most of the time we fail to push women in when we talk about equity and empowerment because of lack of their representation in the decision-making areas. And in that respect, African Union did a sort of a survey, not only to look at member parliament, but survey to look at all the areas of decision-making, right from the grassroots level to the political level, which is cabinet and parliament. And out of the survey, we realized that there are not many women in those levels. And in that respect, so not only our regional institution, when they came, put a cap on the representation for women, but also African Union through in our Constitutive Act, our Constitution, we say member states should have 50% of equal representation in all the levels, and it was mandatory for member states to be able to have women in those levels. So right now we have, I could say, we have like 30% of member states, or 40% of member states have at least moved from 20 to 30% of representation in that level of decision making. We find more women at the grassroots level, especially in focus areas. For instance, we have more women in the water committee, there's more women in the education committee, in their level, at the level of village, at the level of council level, at the level of municipal level. But the problem still we have at the level of cabinet and at the level of parliament. Although, as I said, some countries have managed to reach above 50%. Countries like one that was more than 50%, and in other countries now that we have 15 countries that have gone above 30%, which is very, very positive. Before it was less. We have a country that has only 18 members of parliament out of 200. There was a situation like that, but now they've moved. Each election, we are seeing a lot of progress in that area. Now, we have problems in other areas in terms of lack of data, and especially in the social areas. For instance, when we talk about child marriage, we believe there is a lot of cases of child marriage in Africa. And it's something that really put us behind our development. When we talk about equity, equality, and empowerment, if you keep on marrying your child when they are below 18 years old, then that's really impact negatively in their development and also overall development of the country. But then to get the data, it's a problem, because most of the time in the village level, they have high levels of information. Although our countries have already passed different laws, they have banned child marriage, but to get those data, to get the data in the village, because people don't talk about it, about marriage action, but government knows through the neighbors, through their other system. So that's one of the difficulties. And also in other areas, we talk about violence, for especially wife beating. You find women don't talk about it. I'm talking about where I came, especially East Africa. They don't, Muslim like myself, they don't want to talk about it. If the husband gets them, they don't talk, because it's like shame to them. So those are socially, they are difficult, not because we don't get data, but because the people themselves don't want to talk about it, because they feel embarrassed, or maybe it's shame to go to talk about, to go to police or to go to court because the husband beats you. But other tribes, they feel pride if they haven't beat them. For instance, I know 2 or 3 tribes in my country where the wife is to get beaten by her husband all the time. If they don't beat them, it's like the husband doesn't love them anymore. It's their tradition. So now, yes, data is very, very important. We did household survey in I came from Tanzania, Zanzibar, and this is an example of how effective the data for planning purpose. So when we did household survey, in our surprise, because we used to give loan credit facility to women in the village, and we also support women groups to have their own project. We had one project called seaweed farming, And immediately when we had those sort of interventions, and it appeared, we did household survey, we came to realize those interventions came because from the survey, we analyzed, okay, how many, in terms of domestic life, how many families now can afford, let's say, TV, can afford to send their children to hospital, can afford to send their children to schools to pay school fees, for private schooling. So those data, when we receive those data, we said, yes, this is where we are supposed to go, and we need to do more, because if we do more in those other areas, we'll be able to see the rapid development of women in the continent, countries and in the continent. So data is very, very important, and if you don't have data, if lack of data, then you will not be able to have the right intervention. And in the field of health, in the field of economy. Now, right now, if you ask how many, in terms of employment in the economic field, you will not be able to get the data because most of our women, they are in the informal sector. And the problem of informal sector in Africa is like a silent movie. You will just enjoy it, but you won't get it. You won't get it. They are working very hard, both in agriculture, the informal sector, in the industry, in the informal sector. Even now, we are pushing our member states, we are pushing our countries to move more towards skill development so that women can be able to get access to formal jobs, but still, we think we have to do more. So as I said, there are areas that we don't get that, especially in the informal sector. And most of the women in Africa are in the informal sector. So, as I said, yes, that is very, very important. And I'm very happy now to participate in this meeting, and I believe in the future, because of training, we're training our people in statistics, and we also ourselves geared to have Institute for Statistics in one member state. They are willing now to have statistics for Africa. And I believe we'll be able to provide very, very good data, very authentic data for our people.
Great, thank you. I didn't mean to accuse you of being a country. But I appreciate you having reflected on it both from the AU perspective and from the Tanzanian perspective as well. I'm curious, one final question, and I open it up to all of you. I was struck during Dr. Kishore's presentation and in looking at the publication that the results are not overwhelming. I mean, when you look at the trend lines, there aren't dramatic places where you see huge decreases or increases, depending on what you're looking for. Why do you think that is? When you're looking actually over a fair number of years, and what do you do to make the next decade tell a different story when we're publishing the third version of the report? Maybe you guys are just recovering from the second version, I shouldn't say that. We'll mix it up. Here.
Well, I would say that if you look at the emancipation movements in about 100 years ago, for instance, it needed a lot of grassroots level activity. Individual persons, it needed a lot of civil society organizations, it needed a lot of action. That was the time before internet and the sort of global connectivity. I still say that education is really very fundamental, that if you have this sort of access of that kind of information, you can show how incredible inequal it is still in the world all over, actually, and how if you understand how important it is to include all parts of society in the progress and in development, I think then you have that sort of movement more, because it needs then political decision makers in a sense. It needs leadership also. Really, politicians have a very, very crucial role also in these issues. I bring actually example from my own country. I come from the country of, at the moment, 5.3 million inhabitants. It's quite large geographically. The country harsh conditions in the very north in Europe. We hardly have any resources. We don't have oil like the Norwegians are having oil. We have all the forests and water. So we have to have sort of our own resources are brains and really brain power.
Not in Norway.
I feel some tension.
We love our neighbors. We have a very good Nordic cooperation. I mean, that's right. We are really good. And we are very like-minded. Over the economy. But what we really need, we need everybody's participation in really our development. We used to be a very poor country, and now we are one of those who are really, despite that we don't have oil, we are really sort of gaining. We are really our GDP per capita is high. We have maturity of our cabinet is women. We have had women in every leading position, starting from the president to the bishop, etc. So we have been able to make this in a very equal way. But also inequality is overall increasing. But we need every citizen to build our society, and that has been realized already 100 years ago. Finland was the first country in the world to have women voting rights and eligibility. New Zealand had the women first voting right, but not eligibility. So women were and that was before our independence even. It was rather. I know this is a coincide, but it's really it needs courage in the society to take that action that really pushing women also in the key positions. Political parties are in a do they have enough women candidates, for instance? That is, you need an active party. Norway has had quotas in the boards, in the private companies, for instance. That is very argued discussion, but it has shown incredible good results. The numbers of women on boards is really increasing rapidly and somehow you find very intelligent women also, alternatives, and not from your really comfort zone. I mean, women are really capable of doing also. And not only mentioning, I would like to take also one issue here. It's not of course, women's rights are human rights. But I would like here to take also right of all minorities, LGBT, the indigenous peoples, disabled persons, etc. All the rights are needed. I mean, the society who is respecting the needs of all minorities are doing better according to all statistics. So this is an issue actually of realizing that it is really smart thing to do also, but it needs also very strong political leadership. And unfortunately, it's also missing. To some respect, that like I said, I have in my country also some challenges, and there are in some other countries some other challenges. I hope that we one day realize that it pays off and it brings more sustainable global development also if we are taking gender equality, human rights more into the consideration.
I feel compelled to offer Norway a rebuttal.
Thank you, Carla. And I was so pleased that my colleague from Finland, at the end she recognized also that we have breaks in Norway. But what I wanted to say, and you are quite right, that we have oil, but we also have gas. And we have had that we have been exploiting that since the end of the 1960s. But what is very, very important, and that is a message which we try to convey to as many as possible, and that is that the inclusion of women into the Norwegian labour market has had a more significant effect than all the revenues from oil and gas for the last 50 years. That's an important point. And if I tell you also that the revenues from the total amount of oil and gas revenues for the last 50 years amounts to $1,500 billion, then you have a sort of a perspective of what the significance of women into the labor market has had for development also of the Norwegian welfare state. But Carla, back to your question, and I agree with you that there are also sort of significant movements on the different variables on this data, and that is also why I think it's important to continue to do that good work. But I also think, to your question, that particularly what I would say from a donor country's perspective, that it might be necessary to hold many governments accountable also for the achievements and which were shown here on your figures. And that also goes back to what Ritva said about women's rights, and have those sort of spelled out very clearly for all these countries, and also to see to it that they are respected on an individual basis. I think that's at least what I would like to respond to your question.
No, I think that's a great point. Mr. Ali, I think you and I are the only neutral party.
Yeah, actually, all right. Well, actually, Norway and Finland, they are our development partners, so I will not really be harsh on them. They are our friends.
You can speak harshly on behalf of a couple of your countries.
Maybe. Well, yes, I think what you said in terms of achievement in terms of reaching the equity and empowerment level that we desire for across the board for all the member states in the continent, you find that it's not that everybody, each country in Africa can manage to reach the target that we all want. But I think there is one area which we believe we have managed really to reach the target that we desire. And this is in terms of school enrollment in education, school enrollment as well as in enrollment for girls child in primary school. And this is because when we realize that we have a problem, because many school-going children cannot access primary school. The continent, through the Minister of Education, decided to have the first decade, African education decade. And in that 10 years, the priority was to push the agenda on improving the enrollment for primary school. And also, the particular target was to increase enrollment for girls' child. So in both these two areas, we have seen a very good success in many countries in Africa. And when you talk about school enrollment now, you find many countries, the enrollment level have reached above 90%. So it was not like this 10 years ago, but now we are seeing many countries, the children have access to primary school. Although some countries, the schools are very far from the village, but at least they manage to access first grade, this primary school. Now, when we look at the figure about the percentage in terms of girls and boys in primary school, we find that we have reached a level where we have attained above 50% of enrollment between girls and boys and girls at the primary school level. So before it was not that. It was most of the time the family choose between a boy and a girl child. And in most cases, you find the family would allow the boy child to go to school, while the girl child will stay behind to take care of a family chore with her mother. But now, because of the policy that are implemented in many member states, you find many girls now enrolled in primary school. Now the problem comes after secondary and higher, tertiary, higher centers of higher education centers and tertiary education. This is you find after attaining, reaching the primary level, then you find also the level of dropout for women is high. But now when we have the second decade, the decision is to promote secondary school and universities and tertiary education for skills development. So most of the countries now, if you look at their policy, is to push women. And they have introduced a system where they have a quota system for girls' education. They encourage girls to go to science education. Now you talk about STEM program. We have many government in Africa who are promoting STEM education. So I think with the second decade, between 2010 to 2020, we may be able to see a lot of more good news in the field of women in education. So that's one area that we are very confident that we, with our momentum, we may be able to see a lot of women going to this. Now, why we don't see that like a explosion of success for gender equity and empowerment? I think one of the reasons is because, of course, you talk about budget, and many of the countries they have to choose between peace and security in terms of budget and in terms of promoting gender equity and empowerment. So the budget also is one of the areas that really pulled down. Although the will is there, but the financing could be is a problem. And again, the second area, the law, enforcement of the law. We have so many laws in Africa. We have, the first thing that African Union did was to have what we call the right for human rights and the right for women. This was the first, like we say, bill of rights that African Union did. So we have particular rights for women enshrined in our Constitutive Act. Why? Because we want to protect the rights for women. Because if you give them their right, then you facilitate the empowerment. But also we have the right for children. I don't think many institutions have the right for children. I think UN have the right, particular bill for the right for children. African Union also have a charter for the right for children. So we have outlawed, for instance, things like genital mutilation, things like child marriage and other things. But in terms of enforcement, in terms of domesticating those laws, this is a problem. So some countries have domesticated some of the laws, some countries have not domesticated, but African Union is pushing those countries. Once you have the law, when you have the law, then it's easy to punish those who are going against the law. Because if you have the law, you don't punish, then people are afraid to go to report to police. Because if the police are involved in corruption, if you report about rape, and then you are raped, then you are the one who goes to jail. So people don't report, and that's going to be the same thing. So this is one of the areas, the second one. And this third area is we don't have many people who are, in terms of advocacy, you talk about advocacy, my sister you talk about advocacy. Yes, advocacy is very, very important. But when you try to, you have to create awareness so that then out of the awareness, then you can create a problem. You don't know what's going on in the entire nation because you don't have many leaders. You don't have many women leaders at the grassroots level. You need women leaders at all those levels. At the same time, we need to have champions who also champion on those issues. Once we have, because they are the ones who can go and campaign in the parliaments, they can go and withhold funding for the municipal council. Because some of our system in Africa, you find funds start from the village, goes to the municipal council. Unless you have women groups who can go there and push the agenda, so that members of the municipal council will realize that this issue is important. So awareness is very, very key in terms of having overall what I call picture of success across Africa. But the last thing, which is we don't think about it, peace and security. many countries in Africa, we find we have conflict. And those who are affected in the conflict are women. So even if you talk about empowerment, but if that country is involved in conflict, like as we're seeing now in Central Africa, we're seeing now, we saw last time in Cote d'Ivoire, you don't find, even because the government doesn't really devote time on those issues. It's like you find the time and say, no, these issues, we have priorities now because we have peace and security situation in those countries. So peace and security also bring us back in terms in seeing the impact for development across the board, and the same impact across the continent. Right? This is in terms of our continent, and we have seen this through the eye of African Union. So
Thank you for those observations. Questions, comments from all of you? I don't know, are there microphones?
Yeah.
Oh, great, thanks. No questions, no comments. I don't think that. Sylvia. All right. Microphone's making us great. No, it's working.
Okay.
Sally, back here.
This is the exercise portion of our Please identify.
Sylvia Cavis, Bureau of Food Security, USAID. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentations and for all the panelists' insights. And even though I'm in ag and food security, we often use DHS data to complement our own data collection and need. My question to the panel is regarding how much better we've gotten at collecting and analyzing data, and yet how little the numbers seem to have moved. Every year, I feel like we celebrate International Women's Day by noting how little progress we've made. So I'm really curious as to your opinions as to why the women's movement has been so slow in achieving true gender equity.
If there's another question, maybe we could pair them up and then have panelists speak. And if there isn't, then we don't have to.
My name is Farouk Faramat. I'm the president of a small organization called Why Her, Women Influencing Health Education and the Rule of Law. Thank you so much for the work and for your hard work, and I appreciate the DHS program team for all their efforts. Two comments. The first one, when can we mention men when we empower women? And how can we use the data to involve men more proactively? And then how can we address girls that are married, that are lumped into the married women of reproductive age when we design programs? Because, we see a lot of information on teenage pregnancy, but then, and more than 48%, for example, in India, of girls are married under the age of 18, and they're not part of those teenage pregnancies, which I consider teenage pregnancies. Thank you.
Thank you. Which one? Comment on that?
I would like to take the first one, if you allow. I think we have touched upon your question in our debate. And what struck me when you were posing your question is, of course, that gender equality, strengthening women's position rights, have, of course, had success in many countries, but not in these countries which were shown here in these data. But for example, in Norway, as my Finnish colleagues said, there have been tremendous progress, and we have achieved a lot. Then I think that, and coming back to what I said, I think that first of all, it's important to continue to have the solid data in order to see where everybody, the international community and specific countries, should concentrate their efforts. And we should have a sort of agreement on what we should be doing. And then I really think that the second point is really also to have the rights of women enshrined in the legal in the legal documents, or whatever you call that in English, for each and every country. And then we have to hold the governments accountable for what they are doing. I understand that might be very, very difficult in some countries, but I think it's important to also to build that political movement in order for the governments to actually do what they have told that they are going to do, being that in the IMF, in the World Bank, in the United Nations, or all other places. So we have to go from political statements to actually implementing what the governments have said they're going to do. And if they are not doing what they are saying they have done, then they should be told that. And I think that the international community and countries like Norway, we are very good in advocating sort of that governments do not stand up to good governance and that there is a lot of corruption. But we really have also to make the same message when we are talking about the issues which we have been discussing here today.
Perhaps we'll turn to Ambassador Ali and then Mr. Koukku-Ronde.
Yeah, I think I would like to answer the second question with respect to how do we also encourage men in the total policy of equity and empowerment. I think it's very, very important to also include men in whatever policy we are designing. When we talk about equity and empowerment, and if you design a policy for equity and empowerment for women without including men, of trying to bring men and women together, then that policy is going to fail. And we have seen various countries. Initially, when in the early 70s, 80s, we find we were all excited, and in many of our programs we thought men is our enemy, and we didn't really bring in men to work with women in whatever policy we had. As a result, most of our policies in that period were not really successful, and we realized you need to bring, in some cases, if you want to really the wife to be successful, you bring the husband in the meetings so that the husband will hear what is happening, and he will be committed to support his wife in those programs. So I think it's very, very key to have design a program that would include men and women. And all the success we are talking about, especially in income generation program, in other, even in political empowerment, a man has to be involved so that you will be a woman will be successful. If you isolate a man, then that's most of the achievement that you expect, you will not really reach that level of achievement that you really want. Now, with respect to the question of married women, also married women are they are also key in development aspect of women. And we have a problem of child marriage. You find the so-called married women, most of them are children. Children in the sense that they were married before reaching 16, 18 years old. And when you have a child who is also married, then you have more problems because the child is not going to school. The child who is also a married wife, she doesn't know how to address some of the issues that come in front of her. But when you have a married woman who has attained that level of maturity, then it becomes necessary for government to include those married women in the planning. Because if you have a married woman who is educated, then it's become easier to address issues. For instance, we want to develop a program on health. But if you health, agriculture, if you have a married woman who is not educated, then that can delay implementation. But if you have a married woman who has attained certain level of education, then your program will be successful because then she can be the center of development. She can train other women. She can also train in terms of health, read and explain to other women the implication, what the necessity of all those health interventions. So I think, as I said, married women, we have to put them as key in terms of preparing development programs because they are the one who can really change the geography of our people in their village.
Thank you.
Well, I fully agree also that it is good to focus on men. If you think about all of the issues actually which are under the term of sexual and reproductive health and rights, they are very often men are needed in these issues also. So I mean there is teenage marriages or teenage pregnancies are not happening without men. So men are really crucial part of this sort of discussion. So why is then the issue that men are not included in these issues? So I would also say that there needs to be a lot of advocacy work also at school, and that starts actually I have noticed, and we have evidence in my country actually, that when you start this sort of education at schools early enough, not at the time when people are adolescents, but earlier. So you see immediately very rapid result also. Education again, I cannot really emphasize more the educational part, and it's also challenging. The enrollment is one thing for good news, but in the statistics there is one element that the girls are the group who are dropping from schools. They don't complete the schools, and that is the challenging one. But you need to have this sort of education early on, really very early on. And what we see now, for instance, that we have seen is statistically that in 90s the teenage pregnancies or abortion actually were a little bit increasing. But then when that statistic came, we took measures again and started again more campaigning at schools in early age. And then you see quite rapidly the drop. And we have gained now really one of the lowest level in the world on these issues. And that is one of the issues. Why the statistics? I have been thinking about also that why heaven's sake it takes so long really for all the change, because still every statistic shows that it pays off. It's a smart thing to do, to have all parts of populations included in the development. And you can see on those countries who have been gaining rapid development. I was just looking, for instance, those Rwanda figures, for instance, in Africa. Rwanda is now scoring highest in rapid development. Would that be maybe the reason that there is so high participation of women in Rwanda, for instance? Because the statistics shows in every other country also that if you have everybody on board, you get better, quicker results, and then you get also more comprehensive way of looking at these sort of issues. It's a smart thing to do. I would make conclusion, and it is a provocative end of my, that maybe there are then some leaders in some countries who really don't want even the sort of progress of their countries, because this is the quickest way to do it. Include girls and boys, various religious groups, all minorities. Take them all on board, and you get better results. And more prosperous, sustainable, economic, social, even ecological growth.
That's a good way to end. I want to invite our Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Bureau for Global Health, Katie Taylor, up to deliver a couple of closing remarks. As she comes up, please join me in thanking our wonderful
That was a wonderfully animated panel, don't you think? Let's thank them again. So never fear, I am going to take less than 5 minutes to say 5 things, 1 thanks, 1 personal comment, and 3 requests. Okay? So, first, the thanks. I'd like to invite the co-authors of the report to stand, please. Sally Zweigmuller and Sarah Head. So could you stand? I also, and she doesn't know this, I'm going to ask, because you're far too modest, Ellen, I'm going to ask the head of USAID's Office of Population Reproductive Health, who you've seen up here earlier this afternoon, to stand. Because Ellen, and I'm going to stay for a moment, and then we'll stand, and then we'll clap. Because Ellen represents the sort of what I'd like to think of as servant leadership that is so inspirational. Ellen has been doing this work for, I won't tell you how many decades, but for a while now, and worked her way up to the top of this office through an extraordinary combination of integrity in her work, of commitment to data, the exact sort of data that we see in this report that was talked about this afternoon. And so, Ellen, I just want to thank you, and I think we should all thank you. Personal comment. I just wanted to share, I've been with USAID a little less than a year, and just before I was in the private sector for many years, but then I was in the NGO space, and I worked on issues like child marriage and female genital cutting. And in places like Nigeria and the Amhara region of Ethiopia. And I remember, for me, part of what was really transformational when, for instance, in very, very rural, remote, hard-to-get-to regions of Amhara, we were working with faith leaders, both Orthodox and Muslim, on issues like female genital cutting, and seeing the extraordinary impact that data had on them, and that having a heartfelt conversation about what the data meant and what it meant to women and families and health, and seeing how these faith leaders moved from being a silent majority to proactive advocates, I realized how important it is for us to think about who are those silent majorities of influencers whom we could reach. And so that leads me to my first request to each and every one of us is, how do we think about who are those silent influencers? And what can we do? If each of us can reach one silent influencer and turn them into an advocate, what power might that have? So that's my first request. My second request is, the Millennium Development Goals have had an extraordinary impact on not just our ability to think about progress, but our ability to influence and to mobilize countries and within countries. We're now moving to a post-MDG space. So I would urge, again, each and every one of us to think about how we can maintain these issues at the fore of the post-2015 environment. So think about, what are the SDGs, as they are apparently going to be named, Sustainable Development Goals, that we can ensure reflect the need to continue to engage and empower women. And my third request is far more immediate and mundane. We have a cocktail hour, I believe, in the mezzanine. And so I would like to urge you all to stay and network and continue to think about these things. And I want to close by saying thank you, and let's meet downstairs.
Come on.